So today being the disappearance day of Gadadhara Pandit and Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura, it is our culture and to sing this song written by Narottam Das Thakur, lamentation due to separation from the Lord and his associates. So he compiled this song after he lost his, you can say, spiritual master in the sense of Srinivasacharya and Ramachandra, his dearmost friend. So shortly after their disappearance from this world, he wrote this song. So. Jaya Nilo Premadhano Karuna Pracho Jaya Nilo Premadhano Karuna Pracho Dina Prabhu Kotha Gela Charya Thakur Dina Prabhu Kotha Gela Charya Thakur Mora Swarup Rupa Kasanata Gamora Swarup Rupa Kasanatan Gadasa Raghunatha Patita Bhava Gadasa Raghunatha Patita Bhava Gamora Bhata Yuga Ga Kavira Gamora Bhata Yuga Kaha Kavira Eka Kale Kotha Gela Gaura-Gadadhara Eka Kale Kotha Gela Gaura-Gadadhara Bhashane kutivo mata anale pashivo Bhashane kutivo mata anale pashivo Gauranga gunira nidhi kota gile pabu Se saba sangira sanghe je koi lo bilas se sangana paya konde narotamoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Translation, he who brought the treasure of divine love and who was filled with compassion and mercy, where is such a personality as Srinivasacharya gone? Where am I Sukdamodar and Rupa Goswami? Where is Sanatan? Where is Raghunath Das, the savior of the fallen? Where am I Raghunath Bhatta and Gopal Bhatta? And where is Krishnadas Kaviraj? Where did Lord Gauranga, the great dancer, suddenly go? I will smash my head against a rock and enter into fire. Where will I find Lord Gauranga, the reservoir of all wonderful qualities? Being unable to obtain the association of Lord Gauranga, accompanied by all of these devotees in whose association he performed his pastimes, Narottam Das simply weeps. Okay. Which conversation is it where Lord Chaitanya says that devotional service is a huge ocean? I'll try to describe a drop. Is that with Rupa Goswami or Sanatana Goswami? So in the same way, if you got all day, I guess we can sit here and just read about Gadadhara Pandit and Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura, but I don't think everyone has all day. So we'll just touch on a few points, and then in your personal reading throughout the day. Now, one thing is the appearance and disappearance days of the incarnations and expansions of the Lord and the devotees of the Lord are especially potent for getting their mercy and kindness. That's why they are celebrated. That's one of the reasons they're celebrated, is they're always present. These spiritual personalities are always present and always anxious to give their mercy and kindness and help to the aspiring devotees and conditioned souls who are trying to advance in Krishna consciousness. So they're always there. You just got to ask, right? Just like there's that statistic that what's the number one reason people don't give to nonprofits? No one asks, right? So they're always there waiting for requests for kindness and mercy, but they're especially present on the appearance days and disappearance days. So the obvious takeaway from that is to spend some time asking Sri Gadadhara Pandit and Bhaktivinoda Thakura for some special mercy today and help in our advancement of Krishna consciousness. Sri Gadadhara Pandit is a member of the Panchatattva, and Panchatattva is Krishna, that's Lord Chaitanya. His expansion, that's Lord Balaram as Nityananda. The avatar, that's Mahavishnu, that's Advaitacharya. And Gadadhara is the devotional potency of the Lord, or actually the potency of Srimati Radharani. We can discuss a little bit about that. And Srivas Thakur is the pure devotee, Bhaktavaratam, and the pure devotee. He's considered described as an expansion of Narada Muni, Srivas Thakur. So these 5 tattvas or truths appeared all together to bring the Yuga Dharma and to demonstrate it at its highest level of ecstatic prema. The highest level. So, just like I was listening to a lecture a while ago, and there was a time back in the 70s that they had an idea in Back to Godhead, these different, there's a page or so, and it had pictures, they maybe did this once or twice, pictures of different people, not devotees and kirtas, but like guests and so on, different, men, women, different ages and so on. And they'd have a picture of them maybe with their japa beads or something. And they were saying how chanting Hare Krishna was really helped them relax or do better in grades in school, or, so many different material, not being so angry anymore or just feeling great. And Prabhupada didn't like that. He stopped it. Why? Because those things are all true, but that's not what the chanting Hare Krishna is meant for, is just to make us feel good in this material world. And most people think that religion, that's what religion's all about, or spirituality, is just another way of feeling really good about life in this material world. Being very peaceful and calm, shanti, or whatever. But that's not what Krishna consciousness is. It's the full revelation of our spiritual nature, which is Krishna prema, and that's on a very, very ecstatic level of existence. Like Prabhupada says in the Bhagavad Gita that Krishna consciousness means to be feeling a thrill at every moment. When was the last time you were thrilled? You ever say, boy, I'm really thrilled? You wake up or after prasadam, I'm thrilled. Is that the word comes out of your mouth? Or devotees go, boy, doesn't Govardhan look like he's thrilled today at Kirtan? It's a very expressive word that you're feeling, not just like, I'm doing okay. How you doing today? I'm doing okay. You say, I'm thrilled to be alive. So it's ecstatic. So the Panchatattva were demonstrating that in their distribution of Krishna consciousness, and especially kirtans. And Gadadhar Pandit is described as Srimati Radharani in the mood of Rukmini, more conservative aspect of Srimati Radharani, and he appeared, he's pretty much a contemporary, not pretty much, he was pretty, a childhood friend, appeared as a childhood friend of Nimai, and they went to school together. He was a very, very religious, learned, peaceful devotee of the Lord, that's how he appeared, but they were very, 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 very close. And of course, then later on, as they got older, the ecstatic kirtans at Srivas Anga, and he's the only member of the Panchatattva that followed Lord Chaitanya to Puri. And he was given one place as his residence right near the beach, Yameshwara Tota. I don't know, does Tota mean beach? Do you know? Garden. So it's a very beautiful temple there, Tota Gopinath. And two things, I have so much to say, and there's a whole chapter in this book we can just read and read and read and read. But there's two things Srimati Radharani is known for, special things that attract, well, there's a few things, but attract Krishna's attention. What's one of them? They're doing it in the kitchen right now, cooking. So Gadadhara Pandit's cooking was very, very much enjoyed by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He would invite him to lunch different times there at the Tota Gopinath temple. And also his sweet singing or recitation of Srimad Bhagavatam. That was very, very dear to Lord Chaitanya. Lord Chaitanya would come, and devotees would come and gather, and Gadadhar Pandit would recite the Bhagavatam. In such pure ecstasy, when Lord Chaitanya was hearing it, he would cry so much that the Srimad Bhagavatam he was holding, his tears, all the ink ran. Because if you know the story, that he was the member of the Panchatattva that Lord Chaitanya asked him to please stay, at least a year after I go. And why that was Srinivasacharya came to learn Srimad Bhagavatam from him, and he came to the temple all the way from Bengal, comes to Puri, comes to class, and opens the book and can't read any of the letters because they've all been smeared. And he thought it was actually Gadadhar Pandit's tears reading the Bhagavatam and crying in ecstasy. But the Gadadhar Pandit said, no, it's actually those are Mahaprabhu's tears that the ink ran. You can't even read it. So class is dismissed until you go back and get another copy of the Bhagavatam, then we'll start up again. But what happened was by the time Srinivasacharya returned with another Bhagavatam, Gadadhar Pandit had left this world. So the way he took it was he demonstrated to him the conclusion of the Bhagavatam, pure ecstatic love of Krishna. So that was the best class he ever got. So those two things, his cooking and his recitation of Srimad Bhagavatam. And as one of the members of the Panchatattva, very, very potent, ecstatic, non-different Srimati Radharani, and his mercy is especially available to everyone today, just for asking, Okay. The class is over, what, on the half hour? Okay. So I'll read a little bit about Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura, he was born in 1838. Born in 1838 there in West Bengal. And where do you start? Maybe I'll talk and then we'll pass the microphone around for different pastimes and so on. The main thing, a few things I wanted to stress was Thakur Bhaktivinoda Thakura, Prabhupada, actually your spiritual master said this in a lecture, that when he came to the temple in Boston, good old Boston temple there on Beacon Avenue, I know it well, 40 North Beacon Street, we had the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. And there are black and white pictures of the Srila Prabhupada, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Gaura-Kishore, and then Bhaktivinoda Thakura. And under the picture of Bhaktivinoda Thakura, it says the pioneer of spreading Krishna consciousness. That was Bhaktivinoda Thakura. Of course, back then we didn't have much of a history of what that meant, and gradually it came out. But Bhaktivinoda Thakura was the one who, the Gostianandi, who started the establishing first Krishna consciousness or Gaudiya Vaishnavism as a respected religion in Bengal and India. That's one story. And then spreading Krishna consciousness beyond the shores of India. Beyond the shores of India. That worldwide vision of spreading Krishna consciousness is meant for everyone. It's not a sectarian, limited religion or process. It's for everyone. He began that. He's the pioneer, means people who began the things, and gradually grows and grows and grows. And part of his pioneering was to call for Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, a ray of Vishnu, to help him in his spreading of Krishna consciousness all over the world. And he foretold the coming of Srila Prabhupada to carry on the spreading of Krishna consciousness all over the world. But he set things in motion. set things in motion. Prabhupada gives the example just like the, we don't see it so much here unless you live next to train tracks, but you have the engine starts moving, and then all of a sudden the next car, and then just pulls everything. But something has to start the train. Right? And these big, long trains sometimes. If you're on Route 5, you see these huge trains, long trains. They seem to go on forever. And there's a few of those engines just pulling it, full of all kinds of things. But something's got to pull it, even though it's a big train. So who started this movement of spreading Krishna consciousness all over the world, which has grown to such an extent now and will continue to grow? So we owe a lot, just like I guess you can say in American history, they owe a lot to the pioneers, right? Who came across the plains and this and that, and came from Europe and struggled and suffered so very much. What is that, Donner Pass? That's famous here in California. All those people who got stuck in the snow and started eating each other after they were dead. Okay, but they ran out of food. So, and so many stories of pioneers who came and just started things. Just like you look at the temple here, who are the pioneers? Kirtika, does that name ring a bell? Kirtika, she's the one who designed this whole temple room and the molds and everything. Very talented artist, interior decorator, and Gunigrai Maharaj was a householder at the time. That was his wife, and the devotees who worked so hard to put this all together. And Mahatma Prabhu, right? The pioneers here in San Diego. They had a temple up there on 3rd and Thorn. You can go there. 2 houses. When I came to San Diego, it was the last Sunday it was open. But they had 2 houses, and then they had to move. They're renting them. And they found another place. It was a synagogue. So they thought everything was just fine. So they sold one of the houses and ready to move. And then all of a sudden the rabbi found out it was for the Hare Krishnas and nixed the sale. So they were stuck, all crammed in one house with the deities. And then Mahatma found this place. He was in India at the time because he thought everything's done. So he went to India, and all of a sudden he gets a telegram or whatever from Mahatma saying, guess what happened to that synagogue? But anyways, they worked so very hard to establish Krishna consciousness. Right over here, this little shopping center used to be a gas station. And the devotees ran a hose from it was closed down gas station. They ran a hose from the bathroom, somehow or other, down the alley, and used that for showering. And the kitchen was right here when they were renovating the kitchen. It was a little thing. So, so many austerities. So we're so thankful to Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura for pioneering Krishna consciousness. And one thing I wanted to say was the saving Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement in India was no small task. Because at that time, unfortunately, the Sahajiyas, how many were there? 12 different Apasampradayas, Bauls, all those, had turned people's view of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement to something which is licentious and horrible, and just everyone had no respect. Not everyone, but the general mass of people just thought it was some sentimentalist. All kinds of horrible things were going on in the name of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and that was quite an upward struggle. He had to convince the people that that's not true, and these are all just bogus sects, and that's not Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teachings. And then also you had the general view introduced by the West that all of the teachings of Krishna and the Vedas and all that was just inferior and compared to Christianity and so on, or material science and so on. So all of this he had to deal with to establish the superlative existence of Krishna consciousness. Not an easy thing. Just like you go out on Sankirtan, people may think, oh, it's a little strange. But if they thought that you were a dangerous, licentious cult, sounds like the 70s, remember? It's kind of hard preaching, right? It's kind of hard preaching if you walk up to someone and they've heard that you are just should be avoided at all costs. So that was his preaching, and he did that. He was one who began establishing very strongly that Krishna teachings of Lord Chaitanya are the best teachings, the superlative teachings on God consciousness in the world, in India and the world. So that's his preaching. And so many different things he did. And at the same time, this is what's amazing about Bhaktivinoda Thakura, at the same time he raised a family, so many children, and held very, very responsible government posts with a workload which was phenomenal. And at the same time, managed to write so many books and spread Krishna consciousness all over Bengal and push it beyond the borders of India. So an empowered divine personality. So, and also on top of that, he never had any good health. You know how it is when you don't feel good? Maybe for a day or two or something, but actually he had the rheumatism and this and that and so many different health problems. And, his whole family died during the plague. That ruined it. That's the way to ruin your day, when your whole family dies in the plague. And then, no, his family members, brothers, parent, like that. And then, he was born into wealth, and then they lost everything, and they started living in poverty. But what he did to establish Krishna consciousness simultaneously, very, very heavy government responsibilities, opening schools and different institutions, getting rid of dacoits in Vrindavan as one of his jobs. And there's always dacoits in Vrindavan. Even to this day, there's dacoits in Vrindavan, right? Come up to you and take everything. So, and back then, they're just, they'll kill you for something. So he got rid of those, and so many different things like that. Yes, bogus incarnations, powerful yogis. I was reading in the biography that he was stationed somewhere and he had to deal with the Muslim-Hindu riots. Because what happened was some sannyasi, Hindu sannyasi, wanted to build a temple at a particular place, and the Muslims said no. It so happened to be a burial place, sacred burial place. But he didn't wait for government approval. He started building the temple. So all of a sudden it turned into this huge riots between the Hindus and Muslims and killing each other. And he did the best he could, but the British government removed him from the situation because he was a Hindu. So they were concerned that he would be a target. So dealing with all these so-called mundane things simultaneously, his spiritual responsibilities, the manager of the Jagannath temple. Like Govardhan, you're the manager now, right? You took over for Tyler for a few days. You know how it is. Imagine managing a whole temple like Jagannath Puri. And he upset people, right? He upset the king there. He found out the king was taking money on the side. And he called him on it. And yes, remember this? And he called him on it. And the king got so upset, and he said, what you have to do now is you have to pay it all back by paying for offerings to the deities, to Jagannath. And the king, remember this? The king was so upset, he had these Brahmins come and perform this long yajna to kill Bhaktivinoda Thakura for a month. And then at the end of the month, what happened was the king's son died. So, having to deal with things like that. But what I wanted to read was, this is taken from, there's 12 verses written by Bhaktivinoda Thakur about his vows to be Krishna conscious, like that. And I picked two, the first one and the sixth one, because these demonstrate his absorption, how he was absorbed in Krishna consciousness and becoming Krishna conscious, and for us to understand what it requires, what it means to be advanced in Krishna consciousness. So that's one of the reasons we should be seeking out the association of advanced devotees, because we want to advance. And now, what does it mean to be advanced in Krishna consciousness? And we can try to follow in those footsteps. You don't have to make it up. So this is the first verse, and the theme is the objects of devotion, birth after birth. So devotees are thinking not just this birth, but birth after birth. So I'll read the translation to English. So this is Bhaktivinoda Thakura writing. This is his meditation. No matter whenever and wherever I happen to take birth, so in other words, it's not he doesn't take it as a given. I'm going back to Godhead, I got a ticket. No. No matter whenever and wherever I happen to take birth, let my loving affection and attachment remain unshaken throughout each and every lifetime for the following things. So he's hoping that, praying that however many lifetimes it is, wherever, whatever situation, these I want to have unshaken attachment and affection for. For my divine spiritual master, for Sri Gauranga, for the detailed topics of pure devotional service and the methods of its execution, as personally instructed by him. For the holy places of pilgrimage such as Sri Navadwip, Sri Kshetra, that's Jagannath Puri, Sri Vrindavan, etc., which are all blooming with divine sanctity due to his performance of wonderful pastimes therein. For the Diksha mantra bestowed upon me by the divine grace of my spiritual master, for the holy name of Sri Hari, for the most beloved eternal associates of the Lord, for the sacred days of celebration throughout the year, such as Ekadasi, Sri Janmastami, Sri Radhastami, and the appearance and disappearance days of great Vaisnava acharyas. For the Lord's dearmost devotees who strictly follow in the sacred footsteps of Srila Rupa Goswami, and for the holy scriptures narrated by Srila Sukadev Goswami, such as the Srimad Bhagavatam. So that's his hope, his prayer, that in every single lifetime he still has attraction and affection, deep attraction and affection for these objects. And the 6th verse, it's favorable, authorized practices and devotional qualities. So he says here, my austere vow is constant devotion to the lotus feet of Sri Hari. In order to execute that vow, I have accepted the following qualities by my own endeavor. I practice great humility in my dealings with everyone. I try to keep simplicity and purity prominent in all of my practical arrangements. I maintain extreme tolerance in all types of favorable or unfavorable circumstances. That's both happiness and distress, because you get disturbed in both, right? Samaduka sukha dhiram, Krishna says you got to be steady in both. Then, I offer all respect unto others regardless of who they are. I feel genuine compassion for all living entities and act accordingly. There are many transcendental activities which are recommended by the great devotees who are fixed up in unalloyed devotional service to the lotus feet of Sriman Mahaprabhu, and these can be found described in the books that are full of the imperishable character and pastimes of Mahaprabhu, Sri Krishna Chaitanya. Only such transcendentally nectarian activities being recommended by great devotees and practiced by Lord Chaitanya himself are indeed my own. So this is his very advanced and deep meditation of great humility and simplicity and tolerance, respect for others, genuine compassion. These are all necessary requisites for advancing in Krishna consciousness, and he's explaining that. We can't go around. You can't go around in Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness means just like when you're sick and you get better, you have good health. That's just natural. So the natural symptoms of devotees are described here. Of course, there's 26 qualities of devotee described and detailed in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and it's good to study those and try to emulate those. But this is his specific meditation, and you can see this Trinadapi Sunichena Tororiva Suhishnana Manida Manadina Kirtaniya Sadahari. For devotees are always absorbed, and Thakur Bhaktivinoda Thakura, he was always absorbed in the chanting. So many songs he's written, books of songs, absorbed in the bhajan and chanting of Hare Krishna. And his qualification is described here, like that. So tolerant, humble, always offering respect to others and never expecting any honor for himself. Always feeling great humility. And that's for all jivas. That's what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is, one of his main teachings is jiva doi. What does that mean, jiva doi? For all living entities. Just very, very compassionate, seeing the suffering of all living entities, like that. And seeing that compassion, helping them by giving them Krishna consciousness and expanding that as much as possible. So it's 8:24. I thought it's probably a good idea to pass the microphone around. There may be some questions, but more than questions, there may be a certain pastime someone wants to talk about, Sri Gadadhara Pandit or Bhaktivinoda Thakura, because there's a lot of nectar to be churned. So do you take this microphone, or is there another one?
So I have two things. I have a question about Gadadhara Pandit, and then I also have a pastime from Bhaktivinoda Thakura. So we often hear this pastime of Tota Gopinath, and how Gadadhara Pandit had become so old that Tota Gopinath sat down. But if you study, Gadadhara Pandit left a year after Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. They were born around the same time. So Gadadhara Pandit would have been only 45 years old, roughly speaking. So it seems that this pastime of Tota Gopinath sitting down, it seems more like a folklore than it actually does like a history. And I've heard this from some Maharajas in the movement, that it's more of a folklore. Do you know anything about this? No?
No. But I do know that in the last, after Chaitanya Mahaprabhu left, he had become completely like a ghost of himself, out of separation, very, very frail, and I mean, you wouldn't recognize him. So I don't know if they're saying that pastime happened at that time, after Chaitanya Mahaprabhu left, but I don't know of any going one way or the other.
Yeah, so I was listening to a class on this book, Prema Vaivarta, by Jagadananda Pandit. And so in that book, Jagadananda Pandit is glorifying Gadadhar and Gaura. That's a worship that a lot of Gaudiya Vaishnavas do on the platform of Raganuga. So in this class, Maharaj was explaining that Tota Gopinath is the form of Krishna that's described in the Brahma Samhita, and that he's always that form is always sitting. That it's not that he sat down, it's a folklore. So I heard this from Shiva Ramaraj in a class. That's the first time I've heard it, because most of the time you hear that he sat down. But I heard contrary, so I'm looking for more references, because he's the only person I've heard say that. But he's a pretty, yeah, I mean, I could try.
What was his, what did he just leave it at that?
He kind of left it at that, but it seemed he was pretty matter-of-fact about it. A good person to write to would probably be Madhavananda Prabhu. Yeah.
Hope it's not a deal breaker for anyone. Hang on, there's lunch at 12:30.
Okay, so one thing about Bhaktivinoda Thakura that I've always found really interesting is that when he finally moved to Gaura-Gadadhara and developed that property the way he did. So Sarabi Kunja, right? Yeah. So one thing that's really interesting that I've found so fascinating about just how powerful he was, that the government, they built a railway from Krishnanagar to Gaura-Gadadhara just so Bhaktivinoda Thakura could work a little bit. They built a rail line just for him.
You see that track?
I know it's getting late, but I got to tell at least a summary story of Bishikashane. That's my favorite pastime. So Bhaktivinoda Thakura, as you mentioned, he got rid of the dacoits. He did many heroic things, as a magistrate, which was also in that case a great act of helping the pilgrims to Vrindavan. So this was a combination of fighting against bogus, avatars, which is part of the whole business of lack of credibility, not giving credit, and also helping the government, his government activities, because this guy was a revolutionary. He was so Bishop Geshem was claiming to be. He had mystic powers. He was a yogi, and he was claiming to be Mahavishnu, or he was Mahavishnu. And there was another guy who was associated with like Brahma, I think.
Brahma and Shiva.
Yeah, Brahma. So he had these powers, and he had gained the following. He was able to cure people of diseases, which is, can you see how popular that would be? But he was also having his own rasa dance with the wives of respectable Brahmins and everything. And so that was caused a huge uproar and got to Bhaktivinoda and got to the government. So first he went there with a small contingent of soldiers, and he told them, you have to stop this, and otherwise we're gonna arrest you. And he would say, oh, you can't, and wait till you see what I can do. And he started leaning back and forth, and fire came from his head, and sparks and things. And he had a whole group of people there because he was curing them, and they were worshiping him as Vishnu. So he had, so it was a big challenge. So Bhaktivinoda comes back with a big company of soldiers, as we were arresting you, and he tried to pull some kind of I forget what it was, some kind of other magic, but Bhaktivinoda wouldn't hear it, and so they actually arrested him. And they hauled him off in a cart, and they put him in a jail. And there was a trial. So Bhaktivinoda was charged with a trial, and he wouldn't eat. He wasn't eating at all, and he wasn't. I mean, it was days and days and weeks were going on. He wasn't eating, showing his powers. And you can imagine around the jail, they would have all his followers, and they would chant his mantra, whatever, release him. So Bhaktivinoda was fearlessly going against all this public opinion and progressing with the trial, and it was almost the last day. And so the Bishop Geshem said, huh?
His whole family and he almost died.
I know that. I'm about to tell it. It's spoiling the story. And so he said to the Thakur, he said, go home and see what disaster has come to your family. So he goes home, and his youngest daughter couldn't speak or something like that. I mean, she had, it was horrible. And his wife was saying, let him go, but let our whole family perish, but we have to get this guy. So he went back, and there was another day, and then he attacked him, and when he couldn't walk, so Bhaktivinoda had to be carried to the court in a palanquin, a stretcher really. I think he was lying down, and he pronounced the guilty verdict. 6 months in jail. And there was a big uproar. All the followers, And there was it Rabinshaw? I think there was one of the English guys. They had heard that these yogis keep their strength in their hair. So as he was being taken away, he got behind him and he cut off all his hair. And he hadn't been eating or anything. And he just collapsed. All his strength was gone. And he died. I think he died in jail, if I recall.
Took poison.
Took poison. Suicide. Yeah. So this is one of the many heroic pastimes that he did. It's wonderfully told. There was someone who must have written it or kept notes while it was going on, and that's in that book and other accounts I've heard. And then he just one other thing. He wrote a long autobiographical letter to Lili Prasad, his eldest son. And it's fascinating because, he was schooled by the British, and he had some affinity for Christianity and things. Externally, he was showing this. And then he heard about Chaitanya's teachings, but he couldn't find it. Had become so covered, he couldn't find a copy of the CC anywhere for I don't know how long. When he finally got it, then he became the Bhaktivinoda Thakura that we know. He said, "Oh, this is actually it," and then he started his whole preaching program and writings and things, which are so voluminous and potent. And of course, we shouldn't, ignore the ray of Vishnu and that
right.
Bhaktisiddhanta,
One
Okay, anyone else here?
I particularly like that pastime about Chaitanya Charitamrita, especially when you just see, I don't know what year he found the Chaitanya Charitamrita, but regardless, 100 years later, you could make one call to the BBT and have a Chaitanya Charitamrita sent to your house in 3 to 5 days.
Yeah.
And it took him 10 years.
Digital version, instantaneous, with purports by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Okay, do we have time for an online question?
Yeah. Otherwise it'd be a revolution.
Okay.
You can just say yes.
Prabhu, Hare Krishna, you have a question? Vijay Krishna.
Yeah, from Zoom?
Yes, you are our
Yes.
Zoom representative.
Oh, thank you very much, Prabhu. You're very kind. Dharmasetu Prabhu Dandavat Pranam. My question is, Bhaktivinoda was a high court judge, had vast erudition, and was spiritually accomplished, but still he remained prideless, humble, and friendly to all. Based on this, my question is, how do you explain that the conditioned living entity, when he has a high post and vast erudition, he chooses to go the opposite way, like becoming proud, arrogant, and unfriendly?
That's what Krishna consciousness is all about. The nature of the soul is to be with all of these divine qualities. So he's showing that despite all of those material acquisitions and position, if someone's Krishna conscious, they're unaffected by it, completely unaffected. Look at Lord Brahma. Our Lord Brahma is a pure devotee. He's running a whole universe. He could get really puffed up, but he's just wants to take birth as a little clump of grass outside of Vrindavan, so the gopis can step on him.
King Prataparuja.
King Prataparuja. So these are all symptoms of Krishna consciousness, which are bewildering to the conditioned souls, because you're right. Generally we see when people have Janmai Shvaya Shuta Shri Bir, right? When they get good birth and opulence and education and bodily beauty, they go bananas. Just like that billboard up there, right? They go bananas. They go crazy. They just lose it. Mada means mad. They become mad. Just washed away by the current of material nature. So the only way to escape that is by being Krishna conscious. And all of those natural qualities are there. They all come out. It's the nature of a Krishna conscious person. They're not at all affected by these things. They're insignificant. Like that. So we should end here. I hope that's a good enough answer.
Oh, Prabhu, better than that, as usual. Outstanding answer to my question. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Sri Gadadhara Pandit and Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura. So there is, what time does everyone gather in the temple room? Who's not out in Sankirtan? 10 to 12. There's Pushpanjali. There'll be art in Kirtan. Now, simultaneously in this corner here, we have a ceremony going on with about 20 people. A gentleman, 36 years old, just died. No, maybe a heart attack. They called me from the Bengali Association, so the widow's coming. No children, fortunately, but just kind of last week I got the call. So we're doing the Shrad ceremony for that departed soul. But, it's Amavasya, so we're going to be, just enjoy life. Chant, dance, and ecstasy. That's what I'm saying, and I'm not charging any extra for that. I'll tell them that. So I told them there'll be devotees kirtan, and they know that. The kirtan going on, that blessings, and they sponsored the lunch. A big donation for prasadam for themselves and for all the devotees. So afterwards, Bengalis, yes. So, just don't worry, not to be quiet or anything like that. We're just having this Shrad there and from 11:30 to 12:30. Yeah, just go on, have kirtan. This is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement. So, okay, all glories to Srila Prabhupada.